My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 67 years old. I spent my whole life in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The farmhouse on Bridgetown Lane was my pride. I designed it myself in 1986 when my husband, Peter, was still alive. We raised our son, Daniel, there. That house held every season of my life. It had weathered hurricanes, blizzards, and 3 generations of Ellis family dinners. And then, on a windy afternoon in March, I stood at my son's funeral, watching the soil fall on his coffin, when my son-in-law, Evan, leaned toward me and said something that stopped my breath. "You have 21 days to leave the house. Start packing, tonight." His voice was steady, his eyes were dry, and he walked away before I could form a single word. Let me go back so you can understand how any of this became possible. My husband, Peter, died in 2020 after a sudden stroke, 6 days in the ICU, then he was gone. For months afterward, I couldn't sleep in our bedroom. I'd find myself wandering the house at night, touching the door frame he built, the table he refinished, the cedar cabinets he installed one winter when money was tight. The silence in that house felt like a punishment. My son Daniel saw how lonely I was. He was 42 then, married to Evan Thompson for almost 5 years. They lived in a cramped townhouse downtown, always juggling space. "Mom," Daniel said one evening, "why don't we switch? You take the downstairs suite. Evan and I will take the main floor. You won't be alone, and we can help each other." It sounded perfect. My lawyer, Marvin Doyle, told me not to sign the full deed over, but Daniel was my only child. I trusted him the way a heart trusts its own pulse. I signed it all to him. The first 2 years were peaceful. Daniel and I planted tomatoes together every spring. We built a small greenhouse out back. Evan seemed polite, distant, yes, but not unkind. He worked as a paramedic and was gone most nights anyway. But over time, Evan began to treat me like a problem he wanted to hide. "Margaret, the main kitchen gets crowded. Use the kitchenette downstairs," he'd say. Or, "We need privacy. Maybe visit your book club more often." Daniel always apologized. "He's stressed, Mom. Long shifts." But I noticed Daniel changing too, losing weight, sleeping odd hours, wincing when Evan spoke too sharply. Then last October, Daniel collapsed outside his clinic. Kidney failure, liver inflammation, no known cause. For 3 weeks, I sat beside him every day, holding his hand, begging heaven to give him back. One afternoon, when Evan stepped outside to take a call, Daniel whispered, "Mom, there's an envelope." Taped under the drawer of my desk. "Whatever happens, don't let Evan find it." I promised. 3 weeks later, on March 11th, he died. The doctors wrote multi-organ failure of unknown origin. After the funeral, Evan delivered his threat, and I remembered the envelope that would change everything. What Daniel hid inside that envelope didn't just expose a secret, it exposed a killer. That night, after Evan left for his evening shift, the house felt colder than usual. His footsteps had barely faded from the driveway when I went upstairs to Daniel's office. The room still smelled like him, cedar cologne, old books, and the faint trace of the herbal tea he drank when he worked late. His coffee mug was still on the desk, half full. A thin layer of mildew growing on top. Evan hadn't even bothered to clean it. Maybe he wanted the room untouched, or maybe he wanted it forgotten. My hands trembled as I pulled the drawer open. I reached underneath, my fingers brushing the rough tape. I tugged. Something came loose with a soft rip. A thick, brown envelope. I didn't open it there, not in a room where anyone could walk in. I hurried downstairs to my suite, locked the door, and sat at the small table beneath the humming fluorescent light. Inside the envelope were 3 documents. The first was a handwritten letter from Daniel, dated 2 weeks before he died. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wish I could have told you sooner, but I didn't know who to trust. I think Evan is poisoning me. My symptoms always get worse after he brings me the shakes he insists I drink for protein. I confronted him about the secret accounts I found, and he laughed. He said I'd never make it to court. I'm scared, Mom. I've hired a private investigator. His name is Curtis Blaine. He has the details. Don't let Evan win, please. I froze. Poisoning? My son, thinking he was being poisoned, and I never noticed? I read the letter twice, then again. The second document was a stack of divorce papers Daniel had started filing. They described emotional manipulation, hidden bank withdrawals, forged authorizations, and unusual transactions involving Evan's name, but Daniel's signature. The third document took my breath away. A new will, dated February 27th. Legally witnessed, legally signed. And at the bottom was a short handwritten note. Mom, Marvin already has a copy. Evan can't destroy this. The will left everything to me. The house, the savings, Daniel's pension, his insurance policies. Not Evan. Not the man who had just told me to pack my things in 21 days. I sat there for a long time, staring at the pages, feeling the shock slowly give way to something else. Anger, but also clarity. Daniel had known he was in danger. He had known Evan would take everything. And even while dying slowly, painfully, he found a way to protect me. The next morning, before Evan returned home, I took the documents to my lawyer, Marvin. His tiny downtown office smelled like dust and stale peppermint tea. His eyebrows shot up the moment he saw my face. Margaret, what happened? I handed him the envelope. He read the letter first. His jaw clenched. He read the divorce papers next. His hand tapped the desk. When he reached the new will, he exhaled sharply. Margaret, this isn't just messy. This is criminal. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? He straightened the papers and said, We call the investigator Daniel hired, and we prepare for a fight. But nothing prepared me for what that investigator discovered about Evan's past, and the trail of men who died before Daniel ever met him. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in a cramped office above a strip of repair shops on the outskirts of Halifax. A faded sign on the door read, Blaine Investigations. Daniel must have chosen the man for his quiet reputation. No flashy ads, no large team, just a seasoned investigator who knew how to dig without leaving footprints. Curtis Blaine looked to be in his late 60s. Broad shoulders, gray beard, the posture of someone who had spent decades in law enforcement. He motioned for me to sit, then placed a thick folder on his desk. I've been expecting you, Mrs. Ellis, he said. Your son told me you'd come if things went wrong. My throat tightened. I just want to know the truth. Curtis opened the file. You're not going to like it. He pulled out the first document, a record of Evan's marriage history. Before Daniel, your son-in-law was married twice, Curtis said. His first husband, Ryan Hale, died in 2012 in Moncton. Cause of death, sudden cardiac arrest. Ryan was 38. I felt my hands go cold. Curtis continued. His second husband, Joel Renford, died in 2016 in St. John, reported as liver failure from an unknown cause. Joel was 41. My voice came out thin. Are you saying Evan? I'm saying the pattern is too similar to ignore. Curtis tapped the file. Both men left Evan substantial life insurance. After their deaths, Evan sold their properties quickly, closed the accounts, and moved provinces. He slid across a sheet of paper. It listed transactions from Daniel's business and personal accounts, transfers to an offshore bank in Belize. All using Daniel's forged signature, Curtis said. I had a forensic handwriting analyst review them. The curves, pressure points, the slant, none of them matched Daniel's actual writing. I stared at the paper, my heart pounding. He was stealing from him, for months. And preparing to steal more, Curtis replied. 2 months before Daniel collapsed, Evan took out a new life insurance policy on him. $1.5 million. I covered my mouth. But the most important part, Curtis continued, was medical. He pulled out a final page, a report printed in small, dense text. One of my contacts at Halifax General retested a sample of Daniel's blood, quietly, off the record. Curtis leaned back, his expression grin. They found traces of ethylene glycol. My stomach churned. Antifreeze? He nodded. It sweetens smoothies. You wouldn't taste it. The kidneys shut down first, then the liver. The symptoms look like natural organ failure, unless you know what to test for. My eyes blurred with tears. Daniel. He was trying to tell us. Curtis closed the file gently. Your son was smart. He documented everything. He hired me early enough to gather evidence. He knew Evan might try to erase everything. Which brings us to the next step. I wiped my face. What is it? We take this to the authorities. Quietly, carefully. And we get a court injunction to freeze every asset Evan is trying to claim. My heart steadied. You really think we can stop him? Curtis gave a slow, confident nod. With what Daniel left behind? Yes, and I think we can prove much more than fraud. But before we could take any action, Evan did something none of us expected, and it put me directly in danger. Before Marvin could file the injunction, and before Curtis could hand over the evidence, Evan made his move. It started the next morning. I was in the kitchen downstairs, boiling water for tea, when I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not the usual quick, distracted steps Evan took when rushing to work. These were slow, deliberate. I felt my pulse rise. Then he appeared in my doorway. Morning, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I kept my voice steady. You're home early. He stepped farther inside, leaning on the counter like he owned the room. Shift ended early. Thought I'd check on you. Check on me. The words sounded wrong. He scanned the small suite, the table, the sofa, the sideboard, like he was evaluating what he'd soon be throwing out. You know, he said casually, I've been thinking about your move-out timeline. Maybe 21 days is too kind. My grip tightened on the teacup. Evan, please. I think 2 weeks is more appropriate. He crossed his arms. Or maybe less. Every instinct in me screamed not to argue. Not when he was this close. Not when Daniel had suspected he was capable of something far worse. I'll do my best, I said softly. He tilted his head, studying my face. You seem nervous. Something you want to tell me? I shook my head. His gaze lingered, heavy and unsettling. Then he pushed off the counter, straightened his jacket, and walked out. I heard the door upstairs slam a moment later. I sat down, hands shaking. Curtis's warnings echoed in my mind. Your son was killed, and Evan is capable of doing it again. I waited until I heard Evan leave the house. Then I grabbed my coat, the envelope, and walked straight to Marvin's office. When I arrived, he was already on the phone, pacing. He hung up immediately when he saw me. I talked to a judge, he said. With the will Daniel signed and the threat Evan issued, we can file for an emergency asset. Freeze today. And the police? I asked. We need more before we trigger an arrest. But Curtis is close, very close. Marvin handed me a document. Until we secure the injunction, don't be alone with Evan. Keep your phone with you. If he corners you, call 911 immediately. I nodded, though fear was tightening my chest. Go to Curtis's office, Marvin added. He said he found something new this morning. The moment I stepped inside Curtis's office, I knew something had shifted. He was standing at the window, holding a thin stack of papers. Margaret, he said. I dug deeper into Evan's previous marriages. He handed me the pages. It was a police record, a complaint from 2015, filed by a neighbor of Evan and his second husband, Joel. The report described loud arguments, threats, and one line that made my blood freeze. Victim stated he feared his spouse was trying to poison him. My legs nearly gave out. Curtis caught my arm. There's more. The complaint was withdrawn 2 weeks later. Joel signed the withdrawal. His handwriting looked shaky, not like his normal writing. Meaning? I whispered. Meaning I think he was coerced. My heart pounded against my ribs. Curtis looked me straight in the eyes. "Margaret, Evan has done this before, and I'm afraid he realizes you know something." And that fear became real the moment I returned home and found the basement door wide open, the lights off, and Evan waiting in the dark. When I reached the house, dusk was settling over Bridgetown Lane. The sky had turned the color of bruised lavender, and the wind rattled the loose gutter along the porch. I approached the front steps slowly, rehearsing excuses in my mind, preparing for the possibility that Evan might still be inside. But nothing prepared me for what I saw. The basement door, the one leading directly to my private suite, was wide open. Not cracked, not pushed slightly, wide open, as if someone had been waiting for me. The lights were off. The hallway beyond was a dark, yawning corridor. I froze on the threshold. "Evan?" I called. Silence. My hand reached for the wall switch, flicked it on. The small overhead bulb hummed and sputtered before finally glowing. My living room looked normal at first glance. Couch in place, bookshelf untouched, but something felt off. It was the air. Heavy, like someone had been standing there not long before I arrived. I stepped inside slowly. Then I noticed the kitchen. The cabinet beneath the sink was open. A bottle of clear liquid sat on the counter, positioned like a warning. My breath caught. Antifreeze. The same brand Curtis had mentioned in his report. And beside it, a small glass, clean, dry, placed neatly as if waiting for use. My stomach twisted. I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, unhurried. I turned. Evan stood at the base of the stairs, one hand resting on the railing, the other holding his car keys. He wasn't smiling. His expression was cold, flat, like he'd dropped the mask he'd kept on for years. "You're home late," he said. I swallowed hard. "I ran errands." He nodded, taking a few steps toward me. "Funny, I thought I heard you upstairs earlier. Must have been the house settling." He glanced at the bottle on the counter, then back at me. "Cleaning supplies," he said casually. "You left them out." My heart hammered. "I didn't touch that." "You sure?" He took another step, then another. I held the phone at my side, my thumb hovering over the emergency button. "You've been acting strange, Margaret," he said quietly. "Nervous, distant. Makes me wonder if you're hiding something." "I'm grieving," I whispered. "That's all." He tilted his head. "Are you?" The silence stretched. I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe evenly. "You know," he continued, "I've been thinking about that will reading we're supposed to have next week. I hope you're not expecting anything dramatic. Daniel would never have changed anything without telling me." I felt a chill run down my arms. He was fishing, testing, trying to see what I knew. I backed up slowly, inching toward the door that led outside. "I need some air," I said. But Evan stepped forward, blocking my path. "Stay," he said softly. "We should talk." My finger hovered over the emergency call button. I didn't care if he saw it anymore. Just as he reached toward me, my phone buzzed loudly in my hand. Evan stopped. I looked down. A message from Curtis. "Margaret, don't go home." Evan's previous spouse didn't just fear he was being poisoned. There's evidence the hospital flagged foul play before the case was closed. "Call me immediately." Evan's eyes flicked to the screen, then to my face. His voice dropped to a whisper. "What exactly are you talking to that man about?" Then he lunged, and the only thing that saved me was a sound from upstairs that neither of us expected. Evan froze mid-step as the sound echoed from upstairs, a sharp metallic thud followed by the low creak of a floorboard. Someone was in the house. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then Evan straightened, his eyes narrowing, not with fear, but calculation. "Stay here," he said, voice low. He moved toward the staircase, every step controlled, measured. The same quiet precision Daniel once told me Evan used on emergency calls. Calm, focused, dangerous. The moment he disappeared around the corner, I backed toward the basement exit. My hands shook violently. I kept my eyes on the shadowed staircase, terrified he would return before I could slip out. Another noise came from above, this time softer, a shuffle, and then a voice. "Hello? Anyone home?" My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't Curtis. It wasn't Marvin. It was Nora, my neighbor from across the street. She had a habit of dropping by unannounced with homemade shortbread or newspapers I forgot to pick up. Of all nights, why now? Evan appeared at the top of the stairs. I could hear Nora talking faintly in the living room, cheerfully unaware she had just stepped into a storm. I heard Evan say, "Nora, what are you doing here?" "Oh, Evan, I saw Margaret's lights on downstairs. Thought she might want the blueberry loaf I baked." His reply was sharp enough to make me flinch even from the basement. It's not a good time. I forced my breathing to slow. If he got annoyed, he might escalate. Nora didn't deserve that. She didn't know the danger she'd walked into. Seconds stretched. Evan's voice stayed smooth, controlled. "She's resting. I'll take it to her." No, Nora insisted warmly. "I'll just pop down for a second. I haven't seen her in days." I closed my eyes. "Please, Nora, not now." I listened as Evan took a step closer to her. His shoes creaked against the old wood. "Nora," he said, the warmth gone from his tone. "I said it's not a good time." Silence. Then, suddenly, Nora's voice shifted, still polite, but firmer. "Well, excuse me, but you don't have to speak to me like that. I'll leave it on the table myself." Evan inhaled sharply, a sound I recognized. He was trying to stay composed, but irritation was cutting through his veneer. That was my chance. While they spoke, I moved toward the back door and slipped outside quietly, closing it behind me without making a sound. Cold evening air hit my face like a slap. My legs trembled as I crossed the lawn, gripping my phone with both hands. I didn't dare look back toward the house. I reached the trees near the edge of the yard and crouched behind the hedge. I dialed Curtis. He picked up instantly. "Where are you?" "Outside the house," I whispered. "Evan's inside with Nora. He confronted me. He knows something's wrong." Curtis swore under his breath. "Leave the property, now. Don't go back in there. Marvin just filed the injunction. The police will be notified within the hour." I sucked in a shaky breath. He had antifreeze on the counter, a glass. He was about to, "Margaret," Curtis said firmly, "you need to get somewhere safe." But before I could answer, a loud crash exploded from inside the house, followed by Nora's scream. Curtis heard it too. "Margaret," he said, voice sharp, "what happened?" I didn't answer, because in that moment, I saw Evan appear in the doorway, looking directly at the yard where I was hiding. I froze behind the hedge, chest tight, watching Evan's silhouette framed by the open basement doorway. His eyes scanned the yard like a predator sizing up its prey. Every instinct screamed at me. "Don't move, don't breathe, don't let him see you." The scream had drawn him outside. He cursed, his voice sharp, carrying across the yard. "Nora, what are you doing? Stay out of this!" But Nora was standing her ground, holding the blueberry loaf she had baked. Her calmness was astonishing given the situation. "I'm not going anywhere until Margaret is safe," she shouted. Evan's face twisted with frustration. He didn't expect resistance. He turned back toward the house for a moment, probably trying to calculate his next move. That's when I made my decision. I sprinted across the lawn, ducking behind a thick maple tree. My heart pounded in my ears. Each step was a risk. One wrong move, and Evan could see me. I reached my car, parked near the street, and threw myself inside, locking the doors. My hands were shaking too much to start the ignition at first. Curtis's earlier words ran through my mind. "Get somewhere safe, Margaret. Don't engage him." Finally, I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I drove without looking back, weaving through the streets, until the familiar office building of Curtis Investigations appeared. I pulled into the parking lot, slamming the car door behind me. Curtis was already waiting inside, pacing the office. When he saw me, he dropped into the chair opposite mine, eyes dark with concern. "Tell me everything." I recounted what had happened: the basement door, the glass of antifreeze, Evan's confrontation, the scream. Curtis listened without interruption, taking notes in a sharp, precise manner. "Good," he said finally. "You did exactly the right thing. You stayed alive and brought the evidence with you." He pulled a thick folder from a drawer. "This is the rest of Evan's background. I've linked it to Daniel's case. Everything points to a pattern: his previous spouses, the life insurance, the unexplained illnesses." I leaned back, exhausted, the tension finally seeping out of my shoulders. "So, the injunction, the police?" Curtis nodded. "They're on their way. The emergency freeze has been issued. Any accounts Evan tries to touch are locked. Any property transfers are halted." I closed my eyes, relief mingling with grief. Daniel had prepared for this. He had left everything I needed to stop Evan, but a gnawing fear remained. Evan was dangerous, cunning, and capable of extreme actions. Curtis placed a hand over mine. "He won't get far. The law is finally catching up to him, but you must stay vigilant, even now. He could try something desperate." I swallowed hard. I just want him to pay for what he did to Daniel and everyone else." Curtis gave a solemn nod. "We will make sure he can't hurt anyone again, but we need one more piece, a final confirmation. Toxicology results, combined with the documents, will make the case unassailable." A sudden knock at the door made us both jump. Curtis moved first, opening it cautiously. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. "Margaret Ellis?" one asked. "Yes," I said, voice trembling. "You are safe now. We're here to escort you and secure your residence. We have a warrant for Evan Thompson." I felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. After months of fear, the moment I'd been waiting for was finally arriving. But as we drove toward my house, Curtis leaned close and whispered something that made my blood run cold. Evan had one last secret, one Daniel never discovered. The ride back to Bridgetown Lane was tense. The police cruisers flanked my car, sirens off but lights faintly flashing in the dusk. Curtis sat in the passenger seat, eyes sharp, scanning the street as if Evan could appear from any shadow. "Curtis," I whispered, my hands gripping the seatbelt. "What secret? What are you talking about?" He exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the darkening road. "Evan isn't just dangerous, he's meticulous. He's been planning for this day for months. And there's one thing Daniel never mentioned in his letters, a backup plan Evan put in place to hide or destroy evidence if anyone got close." I swallowed hard, feeling the pit in my stomach deepen. "What kind of plan?" Curtis shook his head. "I don't know exactly, but I have reason to believe he might have moved or destroyed key documents, maybe even falsified medical records further. It's the one thing that could make our case vulnerable if we're not careful." I shivered. The thought of Evan outsmarting all of us, even for a moment, made my fingers numb. So even now, he could still. "Yes," Curtis said firmly, "which is why the police are not just here for you. They're securing the house, the office, everything Evan might touch, but you need to stay calm and follow instructions." When we arrived, the scene was surreal. 2 uniformed officers already patrolled the yard, flashlights sweeping over the perimeter. The driveway was empty. Evan was nowhere in sight, but the basement door remained slightly ajar. Curtis and the officers moved in first, clearing the rooms one by one. I stayed in the car, heart hammering, waiting for the call. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, an officer emerged, signaling for me to come inside. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, voice steady, "your house is secure. Mr. Thompson is in custody. No one is hurt. We're retrieving all documents and accounts for evidence." A wave of relief washed over me, but Curtis was still cautious. "We need to be thorough. There could be hidden ledgers, backup drives, anything. And Evan knew Daniel had been preparing evidence. I followed him inside, passing rooms where Daniel's spirit still seemed to linger. The house smelled faintly of cedar polish and old books. I paused at the basement doorway, remembering the glass of antifreeze, the threat, and that moment when Evan lunged. "Curtis," I said, voice shaking. "He almost killed me, and maybe more than once." He nodded gravely. "Yes, but thanks to Daniel's foresight and a little luck with the timing of the police, he won't get away with it." The officers retrieved boxes, scanned computers, and documented every corner. Curtis moved through the rooms with meticulous precision, checking drawers, cabinets, and even behind loose panels. Finally, he approached me, holding a small envelope. I recognized the handwriting instantly. "Daniel left this for you," Curtis said softly. I took it with trembling hands. Inside was a note and a small USB drive. The note read, "Mom, if anything happens to me, all evidence is on this drive. Evan can't hide the truth. You will have what you need. Trust Curtis." My breath caught. Daniel had thought of everything. Even from beyond the grave, he was still protecting me. Curtis's eyes met mine. "Now, we can finish what Daniel started. But you need to know, there's more evidence on that drive than anyone imagined. And it will reveal the full scope of Evan's crimes." I looked at the drive in my hands, heart pounding, and realized that what we were about to uncover would shock everyone, even the police. Back in Curtis's office, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I closed the car door, still clutching Daniel's USB drive, my fingers trembling as if holding a fragile bird. Curtis gestured for me to sit, carefully placing the drive on the desk between us. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think I have to be." Curtis plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen lit up, and a folder titled Daniel Evidence Final appeared. I held my breath as he double-clicked it open. Inside were hundreds of files, emails, scanned receipts, bank statements, recorded calls, and video footage Daniel had secretly captured. Every file pointed to Evan's methodical plan, how he manipulated accounts, falsified signatures, and orchestrated transfers. The most chilling were the audio recordings. Curtis pressed play on one. The faint sound of Daniel's voice came through. "Evan, I know you've been stealing from me. I've documented everything. Mom will find this if anything happens to me. You cannot erase the truth." The recording ended abruptly, a faint clink of glass audible in the background. My stomach turned. That must have been the glass of antifreeze. My son knew he was in danger, and still had the courage to leave proof for me. Curtis leaned back, rubbing his temples. "This is damning. The amount of evidence here, it's more than enough for first-degree charges, fraud, and forgery. But we have to move fast. Evan will try to destroy any remaining files or accounts." I swallowed hard. "Will it be enough? Even with his past?" Curtis nodded. "Absolutely. The life insurance, the offshore transfers, the prior spouses, it's all here. And Daniel documented every step. The authorities will have no choice but to act." I felt a wave of grief and pride all at once. My son had thought of everything, even when he was weak, even when he knew he might not survive. He had left me a trail to bring Evan down. Curtis then opened another folder. "There's one more piece. Daniel predicted Evan might try to flee. He created a tracking log of the money transfers and asset movements. We can pinpoint everything Evan tried to hide." I nodded, swallowing back tears. He really thought of everything. Curtis's expression softened for a moment. "Yes, and that's why Evan is finished. He underestimated Daniel. He underestimated you." Just as I was beginning to feel a glimmer of hope, Curtis's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then his face darkened. "It's the Halifax police," he said. his voice tight. "I've discovered something. Something from Evan's past that changes the urgency." I felt my stomach drop. "What is it?" Curtis shook his head, his eyes serious. They found evidence that Evan wasn't acting alone in the deaths of his previous spouses. There may be another accomplice still at large. We need to secure everyone involved before he can strike again. I swallowed hard, the shiver running down my spine. The thought that someone else might be out there, someone aiding Evan, made the danger real again. And at that moment, Curtis looked at me and whispered, "Margaret, if we don't move tonight, Evan might disappear and take his secrets with him." Curtis grabbed his coat, motioning for me to follow. "We don't have a minute to waste. If Evan has an accomplice, they could be moving right now to destroy evidence, or worse, to silence anyone connected to Daniel's files." I followed him out of the office, heart pounding. The streets of Halifax were quiet, the early evening shadows stretching long over the sidewalks. My mind raced. What kind of person would assist someone like Evan? And why hadn't Daniel mentioned this? We arrived at the police command post within 20 minutes. Officers were already coordinating, phones and radios buzzing. Curtis handed them the USB drive and all the printed documents. "Everything Daniel left has been verified. He documented every transaction, every interaction, every suspicious movement." One officer, a woman with sharp eyes, studied the drive carefully. "This is extensive. The prior deaths, offshore accounts, falsified signatures. It's one of the clearest cases I've seen. But we still need to find this accomplice before Evan moves again." I shivered, gripping the edge of a table. "Do you know who it is?" The officer shook her head. "Not yet. But there are phone records, emails, and security footage that Curtis flagged. Whoever it is, they've been communicating with Evan consistently for months. That's why timing is critical." Curtis turned to me. "Margaret, this is going to get messy. The accomplice might realize Evan is in custody and try to cover tracks, or they may attempt to recover assets or evidence. You must stay away from the house until we give the all clear." I nodded, feeling the weight of exhaustion and fear. Every fiber of my being was screaming to go back home, to check that everything Daniel had left was still intact. But I trusted Curtis, and Daniel's planning had been meticulous. Hours passed as the authorities worked. Phone lines were traced, banks were contacted, surveillance footage reviewed. Curtis stayed close, offering calm instructions while officers moved with precision. Then he pulled me aside. "Margaret, there's one file on the USB that Daniel labeled as emergency use only. He never explained what was inside. I haven't opened it yet because I wanted you here. He must have anticipated a moment exactly like this." I swallowed hard. "Should we open it?" Curtis nodded. "Yes, but be prepared. This could change everything we know about Evan and his plans." We sat down in a quiet room. Curtis opened the folder, revealing a single video file. The timestamp showed it was recorded just a week before Daniel's death. On the screen, Daniel's pale face appeared, trembling but determined. "Mom, if you're seeing this, it means Evan tried to move too fast. There's someone helping him. I don't know who, but it's why he's so organized. All the transactions, the hidden accounts, the threats, they're part of a bigger plan. You need to use this with Curtis and the police to stop them. Everything else is on the drive." My chest tightened. Daniel had anticipated the possibility of another hand behind Evan's crimes. He had left instructions. But now, knowing someone else could be out there, fear gnawed at me. Curtis exhaled. "We move tonight. We act before the accomplice can cover their tracks. Daniel thought of everything, but we need to finish what he started." And as I watched the video, a chill ran through me. The accomplice Daniel warned about wasn't just anyone. It was someone I had trusted for years. The words Curtis had whispered echoed in my mind as we prepared to leave the police command post. The accomplice Daniel warned about isn't just anyone. It's someone you've trusted for years. I felt my stomach twist. someone close to me, someone who knew our routines, our habits, our home, helping Evan? The thought was almost unbearable. Curtis handed me a pair of gloves. We need to go back to the house. The police will secure the perimeter. But I need you to identify anything unusual in the places Evan might have hidden evidence. I nodded, swallowing hard, my fingers gripping the gloves. Every step toward Bridgetown Lane felt like walking through a nightmare. The familiar streets now seemed shadowed and ominous, every light flickering in warning. When we arrived, the police had cordoned off the property. Officers moved quickly, checking every room, every drawer, every cabinet. Curtis led me toward the basement, where Daniel had left his first instructions. The basement looked untouched, but Curtis motioned for me to check the office space. My hands trembled as I opened Daniel's desk drawers. Everything seemed in order. Then I noticed it. A subtle shift in the books on the shelf. One book was slightly out of place. I pulled it, and a small compartment opened, revealing a thin folder. Curtis leaned over. "That's new. Looks like Evan missed this one." I pulled out the folder and saw documents detailing Evan's communications with the accomplice. My eyes widened as the name came into focus. Marilyn Grant. Marilyn, my longtime friend, someone I had trusted for decades. She had been helping Evan orchestrate the plan. Every account, every signature, every transfer, she had facilitated, and she had done it right under my nose. I felt dizzy. "Marilyn, she's the one?" Curtis nodded gravely. "Yes, and based on her role, she could be anywhere right now, trying to salvage evidence or contact Evan's other associates. We need to secure her before she disappears." The police quickly coordinated a plan. Curtis gave me instructions to stay in a safe room, out of sight, while officers moved to apprehend Marilyn. My hands shook, my chest tightened, but I knew I had to stay calm. Minutes later, I heard shouting from upstairs. The officers had intercepted her, attempting to leave the property. She was escorted down, protesting loudly, but the moment I saw her face, all the betrayal hit me at once. I had shared years of friendship, secrets, and trust with her, and she had used that to betray my family. Curtis approached me. "Margaret, the evidence from her will reinforce everything Daniel left. With Evan in custody and Marilyn detained, the authorities now have the full picture." I sank into a chair, exhausted, my head spinning. Daniel had left a trail of breadcrumbs for me, for Curtis, for the police. Without him, I don't know if we could have uncovered the accomplice. But Curtis's face remained serious. "We're not done yet. There are still hidden transfers, encrypted files. We need to extract everything from both of them. Only then will justice be complete." I nodded, determination replacing fear. Daniel's fight had been mine now, and I wouldn't let him down. And as Curtis handed me the recovered USB drives, I realized the final piece of Daniel's plan. Something he had never told me in his letters was waiting for us, and it could finally expose the full extent of Evan and Marilyn's crimes. The recovered USB drives were heavy in my hands, not in weight, but in the gravity of what they represented. Every file, every recording, every document Daniel had carefully prepared was finally in the hands of the authorities. Curtis guided me through the contents, explaining the significance of each encrypted file, each bank transfer, and each communication between Evan and Marilyn. "This is it, Margaret," Curtis said softly. "Everything Daniel anticipated, every move, everything he feared Evan and Marilyn might do, we can stop it now." We worked late into the night. Police officers cross-checked the evidence, forensic accountants traced the offshore accounts, and Curtis coordinated with the Crown prosecutors. By morning, the full scope of Evan and Marilyn's crimes had been revealed. Forged signatures, hidden accounts, life insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Every piece of evidence was airtight, thanks to Daniel's foresight. The trial began weeks later. Witnesses, documents, audio recordings, and the meticulous tracking Daniel had left behind made the case nearly unassailable. Even Evan and Marilyn's high-powered defense teams couldn't cast doubt on the chain of evidence. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When the verdicts were read, I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Both Evan and Marilyn were found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Life sentences were handed down with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Every attempt they had made to manipulate, threaten, or intimidate had been undone. Justice, finally, had prevailed. Walking back into the house on Bridgetown Lane felt surreal. I touched the walls, still smelling faintly of cedar and old books, and for a moment I felt Daniel's presence beside me. The basement office, the greenhouse, every corner he had cared for, now held not only memories but also the victory of truth. I spent days going through Daniel's letters and recordings, crying, laughing, and remembering. His foresight, even in his final weeks, had saved not only my life, but ensured Evan and Marilyn would never harm anyone else. I set up a small memorial in the basement, a tribute to Daniel, to his bravery, and to the meticulous planning that had made justice possible. With the house secured and Daniel's legacy intact, I decided to honor him in a way he would have appreciated. I converted part of the basement into a community workshop. Woodworking tools, benches, and materials filled the space. Local youth, many without guidance or opportunity, were invited to learn the craft. Each piece they built reminded me of Daniel, careful, creative, and committed. Every Sunday, I visited Daniel's grave at Riverside Cemetery, placing fresh flowers, brushing snow from the headstone in winter, and sharing stories about the workshop. I spoke to him quietly, telling him about the kids, the lessons they learned, and the justice we finally achieved. Life slowly returned to a peaceful rhythm. Though I carried the grief of losing Daniel every day, I also carried pride in his courage, intelligence, and love. The house on Bridgetown Lane remained standing, strong and enduring, just as Daniel had ensured the truth would stand. If there's one lesson I learned through all of this, it's that love and foresight can reach beyond the grave. Document everything, protect those you love, and trust in the integrity of those who fight for justice. The people who hurt us may seem powerful, but they can never outrun the truth. And as I sit in Daniel's workshop, watching young hands measure, saw, and create, I know he is still here, guiding, protecting, and reminding me that justice always finds a way. Daniel's courage saved me, and his legacy will protect countless others. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about safeguarding the future.